Well, welcome, Lydia. It's really a pleasure to welcome you to the, to see you. And I'm glad you got back from Chicago. I want to hear all about it. But we're going to ask you to share about your background and that, and we'll take it, as they say, from the top, right? And welcome to you in the audience, and it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Colia Liddell Lafayette Clark. And she is a stalwart member of the civil rights movement that goes right back almost to the inception of that, at least in our modern era. And we're going to be talking about her career, her background, and about the current state of affairs, particularly, I presume, as it relates to civil rights. And there are a couple of problems left that the world still has. Everything isn't perfect yet, but we're laboring to get it there. And Colia, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to it.
You share with me where you were born and raised, that kind of thing, as a way to wade into this conversation. This is the Colia Clark hour. So
thank you so much. So
my pleasure.
I was born in a small area outside of Jackson, Mississippi, in Hinds County. The area of my birth certificate has a contradiction. It says I was born at Learned, Mississippi. Actually, I was born at Dry Grove, Mississippi.
Okay.
Dry Grove no longer had any township status at all by the time I came along. I was born in what was called the Little House on the old Durr Place. The Durr Place had been taken by the federal authorities, of course, following the Civil War.
Okay.
So I was born in a tomato patch.
In a tomato patch?
Actually surrounded, because my parents were raising tomatoes, born into a farm family, and I am the sixth child. My mother lost one child, so I'm the first girl.
Okay.
After four boys, 4 living children.
You had a lot of brothers take care of you.
I had 8 brothers.
You had 8 brothers taking good care of you?
4 before, sister, and 4 after. So it was a very fascinating place to be. Wonderful piece.
What was the family setting like? Was it good? What was it like?
Excellent. I grew up with a mother and a father.
Yeah, yeah.
I grew up
and all those brothers take care of you.
And 8 brothers.
Yeah,
4 younger. We took care of the younger ones ourselves. What do you mean? The girls took care of the younger boys.
Yeah. Okay.
My mother was from a family, of course, that did not believe in children back-to-back, so she has no back-to-back children. We are 2 to 3 to 4 years apart.
Okay.
And so she had children across 20-plus years, about 24 years. Of having babies. So my oldest brother I always saw almost like an uncle. Because he was 10 years my senior.
Right.
But then my youngest brother saw me as a mama because I was 12 years his senior.
Yeah.
But I was born into a big farm family in transition. At a time of transitions. I was born at the end of the penny festivals. The penny festivals were festivals initiated really by Dr. Du Bois and others in the North.
God bless him.
To introduce culture and to develop literacy.
Right.
And they traveled all across the land, so there would be individuals who would make it their life choice to travel to the South, especially into the South. And they would work with people in the cotton fields or wherever they could find them, teaching reading and writing and arithmetic, history, and other subject matter. And of course, dealing with black folk it's like the black church. The black church is not an institution where you go to pray, as we soon found out with Reverend Wright. The black church has always been an economic, social, political institution.
Okay.
So also that is true for the black community as a whole, because our condition living in a culture of captivity.
Right where you are. Yeah.
And I was born in a culture of captivity.
Okay. Yeah.
Even though there are those who thought it had ended in 1865, the gospel truth is that the symbols of subordination and the lack of respect for law, in fact, the inclusion of the new law, because by 1896, America has a new law that we call segregation, but in fact is apartheid. So I grew up in an apartheid culture.
No doubt, no doubt.
And in an indirect system of rule, where actually we didn't have the bosses right down in the community as they would be in the Mississippi Delta often, but in the Jackson area, which was considered a more progressive area, an area where the white community, which wanted to see itself as middle and upper middle class, kept out poor whites. So poor whites were in the surrounding counties. So in quotes, certain elements that were of the population. But certainly we had the same issues at the surrounding counties, certainly not as intense as Copiah, not as intense as racism, Copiah County.
Copiah, these are counties.
It's a county surrounding Hinds County.
Yeah. Okay.
Jackson is the capital.
Okay.
It is this capital. We are located central Mississippi. We are not Guff people. We own the mighty Pearl and not the Mississippi.
Guff?
Guff Coast.
What's that? Oh, Gulf.
Gulf Coast.
Oh,
now, you got to get accustomed to my Mississippi accent.
I got to catch up with the words.
Slow me down.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
also,
slow you down. Yeah.
Mississippi has 5 regional African accents, and I'm from a sub-region of that, which is a combination of African, of course, the European populations and the indigenous populations. My mother's people were indigenous people as well as Africans, and of course, we don't own whites in the family because they came in through rape. But I have 5 great grand white fathers, along with my black ones and my native, one native ancestry. So I'm born here then in rural Hinds County.
Now, I don't want to put a thing on it. What year were you born? So
1940. I don't mind telling it.
1940. Oh, you're just a youngster. I see. Yeah. Okay.
Am I a youngster?
Yeah, to me, you're a youngster.
Oh, well, don't tell your age now. Careful.
Okay.
Don't let me set you up.
No, I'm trying to put it because we're trying to put it in. We were just chatting before the camera started. You remember, harking back to Lucy Commissar, who was down there in '62 somewhere in Mississippi working on a newspaper or something.
She was
and
at
she had come
Jackson.
on down from New York City, and the thing was beginning to stir. Things were beginning to stir, and we want to get to that. But this background is really good. So 1940, you were about 22.
The year of the third largest flood in the history of the state.
Okay.
I grew up in a family for which floods were a very important discussion, because my father, my maternal great and grand and great grandfather were conscripted by the American government, along with all black men within a 150-mile radius of the flood of 27.
To do some levee work or something?
To work on the levee.
Yeah.
I had one cousin who was shot to death.
Was there one flood that particularly is memorable or something?
27. 27 is the Great Flood.
27 was the Great Flood. They had the Johnson Flood up in Pennsylvania, Johnston Flood. But, okay.
Well, that flood actually it was a backwater flood.
Now, you're flooding
of
what river, or what's the flooding?
Well, the major flood was the Mississippi River.
The Mississippi, yeah.
27, the major flood's the Mississippi River. But Mississippi is a river state.
Okay.
So we got some unique rivers. The Big Black, the Yazoo, the Mississippi. The Pearl is in Hinds County.
Okay,
So I'm associated with the Pearl and both the Big White Oak Swamp and the Little White Oak Swamp.
Okay,
which are massive swamp areas.
And that's what they remember that year. The 27 was the year of that and everything. But floods was a regular thing.
It happens all the time.
Yeah, that was part of the being raised in Mississippi in that kind of time. Yeah.
Yeah, raised. That's a part of the culture of growing up in my family.
1940, just coming into the First World War or Second World War.
Oh, I remember that. Okay, I tell you about the First World War. I have a long memory. My memory starts.
You can't remember the First World War, darling.
I remember the second one. I don't remember the first.
Yeah, I know.
But I remember the second because my mother had a brother that was recruited very young. He was about 16.
Yeah, into the war. Yeah.
Yeah. So I woke up every morning with, Hitler called the devil on the phone the other day. The telegraph girl, she listened to all he had to say.
Oh, preach, teach.
She would be singing, "Oh, Tojo, you better leave Pearl Harbor alone." She'd be beating up food. "Oh, Tojo, you better leave Pearl Harbor alone."
Oh,
so as a little child,
that's great.
I was immersed in my mother's ethnocentrism.
All right,
against Japanese, because Japanese were considered yellow people with slanted eyes. And
all
in fact, I thought there was one when we moved. I was born in the little house on the old Dore place, but when I was 2, we moved to the big house on the old Coca place.
Okay.
And now the Coca place. Now these are all homes that were taken by the federal government. All these what was left over from white plantation systems.
All right.
And these owners had not bought them back after the Confederates were allowed back into the Union.
Okay, yeah.
And so I grew up in an old house called the Big House, that we got our water from a spring. We had the most beautiful peach orchards and pecan groves that you would ever want to see, well cultivated from a time gone by.
Yeah.
Old Big House where you could go up to the top of the stairwell and look across the valley.
Yeah.
Now that hill is not so large, but when I was a little child, that was a tall hill.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They got bigger, but
it had wonderful echoes. And behind the house, I don't know, about half a mile, was a big trench built by little Colonel Dabney around 1866. Little Colonel Dabney was a Confederate colonel who wanted to reinitiate the Civil War and get black folk back into slavery. So he was building his trenches, and I guess it became a joke. So this place where I was born into matriarchal culture,
Matriarchal.
Yeah, okay, matriarchal.
You're talking Mississippi?
Yeah, I'm talking Mississippi matriarchal.
It was matriarchal.
Yeah, matriarchal culture.
Okay.
To which I'm born.
Yeah, okay.
But it had patriarchal control.
Okay.
So my father's people were colored Methodists when I was a little girl. Now they call themselves Christian Methodists. But I knew them as colored Methodists because they were an outgrowth following slavery, during and right after slavery, of the white Methodist. So we were the colored Methodists.
Yeah.
And growing up was quite a fascinating piece. I was trying to work my way back to the Penny Festival so you could get just a little bit of blend of this culture.
Yeah, yeah.
But my mother's people were Baptist.
Yeah,
and
okay. The difference between the Baptists and the Methodists is a big. There seems to be an awful lot of folk that are of the Baptist persuasion. I don't quite understand why that is, but I'd be interested in what it is. What's the difference between the Baptists and the Methodists?
Well, let's put it, my daddy would say the Methodists come by land and the Baptists come by water, but if they're going to go to heaven, they've got to go hand in hand.
Okay.
My mother would say that the Methodists were not progressives.
Are not progressive.
Were not progressive.
Baptists are thought
the colored Methodists were not progressives.
Okay, yeah, right.
And the group of Baptists that she grew up with were very progressive.
Were your parents political? As much
Very
as they
political.
could be in that? They were
My father
activists
was from the farm labor movement.
Okay, yeah,
And
right.
he had to go to another county to participate, so you can better believe that they were very progressive.
Okay, yeah.
Both of them were registered voters. When nobody was getting registered to vote, they were among that 3,000 registered voters in Hinds County.
Were they able to go out and try and encourage people to vote and do that voter registration stuff and remember the dogs and all that stuff and Stokely and all
my
that?
My mother did go through that, and my father did. My father worked straight through to take care of a family. My mother had a house of children who participated in the civil rights movement, and her home was oftentimes where people stayed.
Okay.
Though we don't like to see ourselves as a freedom house, she provided that function for civil rights workers as well.
Yeah, we're getting up into the 60s.
Yeah, but I want to stay in the 40s.
Please,
that's more
please,
fun
set
than
the
60s.
okay, good, yeah,
I set the
absolutely. Those
stage.
pecan and apricots and whatnot.
So what happens is within this culture where you enter the church house on the right of men, on the left of women.
Right, really?
And children.
Okay.
Older boys considered up here with men.
Yeah.
This is a world in which I come in with slides. A slide is built on 8x4s, and you tack it behind a mule. And you put your big barrels of food or whatever on there, and people with the old flatback trucks would come if you were lucky enough to have them. My dad had an old flatback truck until I was about 7.
Okay.
And there were other folk that would come in their old cars, and everybody would come to the Colored Methodist Church, despite the fact that my mother was Baptist. I grew up in those early years before they did something radical, and I'll get to you. But I got to first get a little older before I get there.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Colored Methodist tradition.
Okay.
So, the baptismals, what Daddy called by land, meaning you're sprinkling the child as opposed to immersing the child in water. I grew up with that religious piece. But I grew up with a mother whose family is related to Robert Johnson.
Okay.
So I grew up with the 16-string guitars and all of the music surrounding that. I grew up in my father's church also with nothing but music, the Dixonaires, who I gather still traveling the country.
I didn't know they had a 16-string guitar. I never did
yes.
hear that. I've heard a 12-string, but I never did hear of a 16. 16
I
string?
think a 16-string with 26 notes.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah,
and the music's a big part of what's going on in
Well, the music is music.
What is the music? You got gospel music? Is
we
that
had
big
the
thing?
old spiritual, which was the most important music for us.
Yeah.
Then we had Jubilee music.
Jubilee?
That was the music that came immediately following the Civil War.
Oh, okay.
The end of the Civil War, black people were happy.
All right.
Tell me, how did you feel when you come out the wilderness? Come out the wilderness, come out the wilderness, leaning on the Lord. Dum. So you got to have this fast beat, this fast pace. Black people were happy. They didn't see what would lie ahead. What they thought was that they were free. No shoes.
I mean, that's immediately.
Raggedy clothes, So this music represented the spirit of a people being released from 240-some years of slavery.
Yeah, I can understand
and so
that.
the music is a live music.
But it still got to be a pretty hard road to hoe, didn't it?
It got to be a hard road, but I'm trying to take you through the church experience so I can bring you there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right?
It's very important,
It's very important that we understand.
To a whole lot of
the
people.
culture was built around the one single institution outside of the family that had been destroyed over those 240-some years.
Okay.
The culture is built around that one hiding institution that hid with African religion in the woods. And when it came out of the woods, it came out capturing the Christian religion as best it could, because that was a safe place to be.
What about back in the days of slavery? What was the church and what was the role of that? Go back 100 years.
Well, let's go back 100 years.
Yeah.
Let's go back two.
All
if
right,
we went
that's
back
good.
to Philadelphia at the founding of the African Methodist Church,
Okay.
you see brothers trying to find something in the tradition of Africa, but not in the culture of Africa.
They have that Santeria in Cuba, where they got a lot of Yoruba stuff and everything, but then the Catholics overlaid on it and everything.
But they brought to the Cuban experience, though, you begin to look at the saints, it will be really, if you really look at them very closely, you'll see that they're the old African gods. That come out of the Yoruba and the Dahomey and the Congo cultures.
Right.
So,
and that had been wiped out. The identity had been wiped out in such a way that they were trying to recapture that. And it's a whole different experience. It's hard for me to understand where the Christian did fit into that, or adopting the things that they were trying to put on to these people whose identity they've just wiped out or tried to wipe out in the slavery days.
Black people learned
hard to know how to
do signifiers, but the religions did not die. The religions are as alive today as yesterday. The people don't openly practice them because it is not popular in Western culture to practice anything African, certainly not African traditional religion. But if you look at the music, it's in the music.
Yeah, the music is there. Yeah.
So the Church of the Woods was an African church, but in that meeting place, in the woods,
now
we
we're
got
back
all
in
of these religions.
We're back in Mississippi now?
No, I'm still in the 1700s.
Okay.
And 1800s,
Right.
16, 17, and 1800s.
Yeah.
These Africans hiding in the woods. So if you look at the Dutch festival that happens every year up at Albany,
I don't know.
there's a Dutch festival that happened at Albany. I can't recall the name of it now, but at Albany, New York, you'll see out of the Dutch culture all of those African traditions in this big festival that happens in late spring every year. Now the Dutch has taken on a good part of it and want to claim it too, saying, well, let us share in it too because we're a part of it. And certainly if cultures intersect one another, the two will have a part of it. But they are really African traditional religious festivals of various sorts. So when we hear people saying, I'm going to do Kwanzaa,
Kwanzaa,
the first fruit of the harvest. For a Southerner, that's a joke. The Kwanzaa isn't. The concept isn't. But your first fruit of the harvest is May. So Africans would be doing May Day festivals.
Right.
And not the Dutch May Day festivals and not the English May Day festival, but traditional African May Day festivals where you would gather for at least a week or two when you're taking the first fruits of the harvest out. So, but going back, though, to this culture, then that Church of the Woods would become, by 1815, when Europeans really began to recruit Africans into the Christian religion. In the old days, it was a plus to be a Christian. So nobody was anxious to recruit an African into the religion. Many Africans came. So the development of a church called the African Methodist Church was a thrust forward. And it came also with two notable sisters who were challenging the brothers, and they became the first black preachers, but also the first women preachers in the United States.
Who were they? Do you remember?
Mary Prince and Zilpha Eloy, I don't get her name correct. Mary Prince and the other woman is Eloy. I can't remember her first name. But they would be these black sisters that would come as church and demanding. One of them said, was not Jesus, Mary, Jesus' mother, a woman? You know, please, brothers, back up off of me.
You had Sojourner Truth?
Yeah, she would be later down the road because she comes into the 1800s.
So
And Sojourner Truth coming out of Kingston, New York area. And of course, traveling the country was her message. And the greater part of her message would be the message of freeing people from slavery, but certainly religion was a part of Sojourner's journey.
Then we get up in the 90s, we had Frederick Douglass. And it was
still in the 1800s, you got Frederick Douglass. In the same time period as Sojourner Truth. A serious giant. And then there's a giant that we don't talk about. There are many giants. Maria Stewart, the great woman, political writer, studied under a man named David Walker. Who had not a pleasant taste for Christian religion. David he put out the first 4 appeals that we as Southerners know as the information piece that would bring us into a greater understanding of why we needed to get out of slavery. And of course the burnings of cotton and whatever else increased as a result of the discussions that came into cotton fields.
Was that there from the get-go, from the time you landed in these shores, that we got to get out of slavery?
Of course, it always was.
It was just a constant thing.
Yeah, we know anybody. Because we were prisoners of war. We called slaves, but we were African prisoners of war. And so that was always, if you look back in the 1600s, your show is going to be on the 1600s of slavery.
What?
I like this. I said, you're going to be on 1600s of slavery. Your show. was supposed to be somewhere in the 20th century, but we could be here for a while.
Yeah, right.
But let me just tag this, because I do know you want to have a conversation. And when you're having a conversation with a person who's taught college, in history and in studies, whether it be women's studies, Africana studies, diversity studies, you get caught at places.
We got a lot to catch up on.
We got to cut.
We're back to the 16th century.
Maybe we can come back and do 2 or 3.
Yeah, we got to do a whole series, dear.
I don't mind.
We got to do a whole series.
I would love that.
We want to get you over here as a producer. We want you to start sharing some of
Oh,
this
that
stuff.
would be wonderful.
Good, good.
That's a challenge,
we're
and
gonna hold you
I
to
accept the
We're going to
challenge.
hold you to that. Okay, that's good.
I don't
You're
ever
gonna become
hold a
one of the
Southern woman
major...
out of Mississippi to anything, because we will do our thing.
Okay, good.
So
I'm glad
if you look
to
at the
hear it.
1600s, you see that they're constant runaways. The first Fugitive Slave Act is 1632, Delaware.
Fugitive slave, yeah.
Yeah, and then the second one will be Virginia, 1634.
Yeah.
So you can see these Africans are running away, but they're running away at that time, taking with them Germans and Scots and Welsh.
Taking them with them
Yeah,
into the
they
wilderness?
would all go together and run wherever they could run to get out of one group getting out of the indenture, the other group getting out of
indenture.
Yeah, both of them was, Africans were said to be indentured too, because there was not codified slavery yet. All right? So that's this constant runaway. By 1645, you get the first eternal indenture. It's a 10-year-old girl in the law. And then, talking about the early law of the colonies.
Okay.
In the law, this child, for whatever reasons it might have been, was given a punishment of being eternally an indentured servant, and any issuance, any children thereof.
Good grief, yeah.
So you don't just
out of the indenture system. They're supposed to buy their freedom, but then
that's right. 7 years was a normal period, right?
The Chinese had a lot of that coming from China too. That kind of thing.
Right, but we're dealing now with the English indentured system and the Dutch indentured systems.
You ever hear of a group called Croydon? There's a book called Gone to Croydon, and there were a group of people, and it was some black people and some Amerindian and then some poor oppressed white people who lived a migratory life between Gary, Indiana, St. Louis, and Indianapolis, and they moved in a triangular pattern, and they wouldn't settle, and they moved and kept moving, and there were a lot of escaped people who were escaped from oppression, all right?
Oh.
And then I think Fard came out of that group that went up with Elijah Muhammad to Detroit and started the Nation of Islam in a storefront in Detroit in the 30s.
Yeah.
But they were people who were running away from an oppressive system, and they moved migratorily, and they wouldn't settle. And I don't know if you ever did hear of them or anything.
Well, they would be doing a logical thing, because the old Shakers were in Kentucky area. And the Shakers, remember, would buy slaves. They would get slaves, and then bring them in and free them, so that the Africans were free within the Shaker society.
Okay,
and
I didn't know that.
And she had an they got a wonderful place out from Russellville, Kentucky. Now, Russellville is cute, because when I was in Russellville, I love Russellville.
You live there, or you just visit?
I go over there every year to do the King holiday. And I was over there the first time a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And it was really wonderful, because the mayor and I were talking, and he said, "You see up there?" And he was pointing to the top of First National Bank. Can you see that bullet hole up there? That's where Jesse robbed his first bank.
No, Jesse James? Jesse James?
Yeah, I'm in Jesse James, vigilante territory.
Yeah.
These people come in 200 and 300 at a time, mass lynching of both white and black, but certainly black, and killing each other. 200 or 300 come in, take over a whole town, and right out.
Marauders.
Yeah. Vigilantes is what they called them.
Yeah.
And this happened as late as 1910. So when you go to talking about anything in that area, you would have to keep moving, because people were always trying not to be tracked down by federal authorities or state authorities as the states began to develop. Because you're talking about areas that are just opening up. This is the Midwest.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just opening up. It's just being what I call cross-country imperialism is expanding.
It goes all over. But you were back in Mississippi and everything, and then, maybe we could bring it up, because you worked with, maybe we could bring it up more to the present. We got the 16th century, that sort of thing.
I started my journey with Medgar W.
Medgar Evers. Okay, but the family was progressive and very interested in change and that sort of thing. Warm family relationship, really good working family and all that kind of stuff.
Wonderful.
And then you got involved in what would become called the civil rights movement. I guess it was a thing that had been going on for a few hundred years within the church and so forth. But share a little bit of that, and let's bring it up to the modern.
Well, let's bring it up to, and I'd have to bring it up fairly because let me bring it up fairly because there's an attempt on the part of many of us to not present the obvious truths of history.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, my family were farm laborers living in the countryside, but in Jackson, Mississippi, and in the Delta and other places, like my parents who were involved in programs, there were many blacks involved in movements that would be, I guess, described as civil rights movement.
Right.
People who were fighting to get the right to vote, which was a big piece.
Yeah, what is that?
In 1945, there was a congressional hearing where Mississippians appeared at, black Mississippians in Congress, demanding the right to vote and also demanding the removal of Bilbo, Theodore G. Bilbo, was the biggest demagogue in the history of this nation.
I don't know who
Bilbo is. You'll have to. He's from Rankin County, Mississippi, that county next door, that poor folks county, a place called Brandon.
Yeah.
And Theodore G. Bilbo was a governor. He was also a senator, U.S. senator. Yeah. And Bilbo also was a writer. Bilbo believed that black folk were had no rights that anyone needed to respect, and was for all practical purposes not even human. That we in fact destroyed the ancient Egyptian civilizations. He couldn't imagine blacks being connected to it.
He's got some history.
But somehow he knew we were there. We must have been there to destroy it. And so, you know, we did usually ugly descriptions of black people encouraging lynchings, encouraging mass murder for all practical purposes. And of course, the Senate wouldn't allow him to be seated. After that congressional hearing, a couple of years later, the Senate would not allow him to be seated. One of the things I remember from my mother, I had been around 8 years old, is her crying as she listened to Gabriel Heater. You remember Gabriel Heater?
I remember Gabriel Heater,
Gabriel Heater was speaking from Washington, D.C., where Senator Jackson or somebody from Arkansas or some weird place in the South had just initiated a bill to have Bilbo ousted. And she was so pleased that he was not going to be seated. And when he died from cancer of the mouth, of course she associated that with God punishing him. Anyway, it begins there. So I want you to know that this background, NAACP, that came into the early 50s when it was still a radical group, and it was still leaning on the early Pan-African movement of the Garvey movements that had been left over from prior periods. Mississippi had 48 Garvey chapters, but Mississippi had at least 2 people who would attend the Pan-African Congresses as they met from Paris and the last one, of course, in Great Britain. But the thing we have to know that this spirit of struggle, this culture of captivity did not die. Mississippi is the home of Richard Wright and William Steele, as well as the greatest blues and gospel musicians there are. We are the home of the blues. But those blues are not just music. The blues is political music. A political story. Often with the worst misogyny, more misogyny, I think, sometimes in the young people are with hip-hop and rap today.
Really,
But when you begin to look at that is you got to go back and get the spirit of what happens as you have the death of Reconstruction. But we have still many of those blacks who became political officers coming into the 20th century. One of the sheriffs in my family was at Greenwood as late as 1910. Just had to be a family member who had moved northward into the Delta region. But you also have to realize that as this culture of oppression tightens and the culture of captivity becomes more focused, black people have an equal and opposite reaction.
That's right. There's the laws of nature.
Resistance becomes the rule.
So it had been there all along, maybe sub rosa or something like that. It had been there and everything, but then it began to come to a real focus along about in the
1940s and 1950s and 1960s.
Truman integrated the Army, right?
That's correct. You have a number of things. You have the death of the one-party system. As a rule, you remember the Democratic had that all-white primary. You get that around 1942. You get the end of the poll tax in 45 with Truman. And then there's the grandfather clause went early on. All of these old political bills were ended. But the segregation established by the Supreme Court of the United States in 1896 had not. So segregation is still the law of the land. the symbols of subordination, where you can't even look a white person in the eye.
Yeah, how does that get? Yeah, okay, go on. Sorry.
Well, when I was,
I mean, that's something like you got to cast your eye down or something like that.
yeah, you're supposed to look at the ground, shuffle your feet and scratch your head. That makes it better, but you don't have to do that. But it would be nice if you did.
Yeah.
Might relieve, especially for a black male, that relieves some of the pressure off if somebody's even a little child.
Right.
Remember, a little child can call you down.
Yeah, right.
So I've had some incidents.
It was particularly grim in the North America. It seems to me. I did a program with a fellow. There was a guy named Bullock. He was from Mississippi, black man. He went over and he became an ace in the First World War, hang out with Josephine Baker and whatnot in Europe and everything. And he said that when Jack Pershing came over with the expeditionary force, the only thing he really brought to the First War, to Europe was Jim Crow.
Amen.
That they didn't have that kind of thing in Europe that we did here, so particularly vicious.
Right.
And so forth. It was worse here.
Worse than the
Caribbean even, I wonder, or
well, I think
it seems to me
that worse in many ways and not so in others.
Okay.
Because we got a chance to know what racism was.
Yeah.
Because our system was so vicious. Mm-hmm. Well, other folks, particularly the Europeans, West Indians, and others, Africans too, don't oftentimes, even though they went through vicious murder and mass murder in Africa, don't understand what racism is. So they think when somebody speaks to you nicely, it's all right. They don't get a chance to see the underlying themes.
Yeah.
And the kind of guerrilla actions that are constantly coming at them, and they're surprised when they do.
Gunnar Myrdal said that's the great American dilemma is the racism. Do you read Gunnar Myrdal?
Yes, I read him years ago.
Yeah. He was a good voice of that and everything.
1940s and 50s.
Called it out in the 40s, yeah.
Oh,
it was America's dilemma was coming. They could see it, and then it came and bubbled up and so forth.
Yeah, E. Franklin Frazier, Gunnar Myrdal, a whole bunch of. But Du Bois.
Gunnar Myrdal also.
But Du Bois calls it in Souls of Black Folk in 1905. And the Souls of Black Folk, which is probably into about 40. This print has been out there so long. Where he talks about the black as having this dual system.
Yeah. And you were born and came up in that 40s. So when you're coming up to the 60s, you're just a young lady. You're just coming up, and you were involved in the thing. Like when did it really start bubbling up? Real serious.
The death of
that
two things happened in
the Voting Rights Act and all that sort of thing, and you had Martin and you had Malcolm and you had Stokely.
Oh, you had so many. Yes.
Yeah.
But in 55, remember there's constant killings in the state of Mississippi. There's constant action.
Killings.
People are having resistance, and there's constant
fruit
killing.
Hanging all over the place.
And not only just strange fruit, but the resistors.
Yeah.
Because many of the people who were hanging from the trees didn't do anything.
Yeah.
They just happened to be black.
Yeah.
A 9-month-old baby just happened to be black.
Yeah.
And so the killings was a constant.
The reaction was getting more vicious? What do you think? I mean, it was vicious.
It was vicious straight through.
Okay.
But when there was lawsuits being filed across the South to end desegregation, when Charles Hampton Houston begins
maybe people could see that was coming.
Oh, yes, they could see it.
They could feel it in the air.
Yeah.
It was coming. Okay.
They felt, the end to that old system.
Right. Yeah.
And so what you have happened is an increase in violence. But the things that brought me to struggle, that began to get me to awaken myself, was two things that happened in 1955. It wasn't Martin King.
Okay.
It was Claudette Colvin, a young girl at Montgomery, who in March of 1955 took a seat on a bus at Montgomery right in front of Dr. King's church and refused to get up.
Okay.
She was one of more than 200 people to sit down on the buses prior to Rosa Parks. She's 9 months prior to, I always say it takes 9 months to have a baby.
Yeah, that's
She was 9 months prior to Parks, and there were 3 days of mass meetings that followed. So just hearing this...
That was in Montgomery.
Yeah. Hearing of this girl really shook me up.
I'm
15, she's 15. What's up, Doc?
Yeah.
Wait a minute now.
And it starts spreading.
Oh, yes,
so
the word is moving on the grapevine, but it quietened.
Yeah.
Then the Emmett Till on August 30th, 19...
Was that 55? Was that 50? Emmett Till, is that long ago?
55. Oh, yes, it is. That was an immediate wake-up call. We always had the lynchings. We always knew about people being young boys. Yeah, young boys being killed everywhere. But nobody ever said 15 to me. There was a brother that grew up with me named L.J. Jones. I had a bad dream, and I woke up, and I dreamed he'd been shot. And sure enough, the next morning, we found out L.J. had been shot.
Really?
He was 16, a year older than I was. But, it didn't... For some reason, it didn't faze me because they didn't call the name 16.
Yeah.
They said 15 with Emmett Till. The boy's missing, he's 15.
Yeah.
Now we're getting publicity also.
Yeah.
So the word is getting out around about mouth, which is usually the way we got word. But now we're getting word on the radio waves.
Word's getting out about who?
Mouths.
Well, word of mouth. Oh,
yes.
I thought you said words getting out about Malcolm.
Oh, hey, be careful.
No, that's a little too early.
Malcolm is Malcolm. Well, you know, the Muslim piece is being heard, and for the first time in probably 100 years, people are beginning to talk about Muslims.
Yeah.
My mother and father always had
That's a
fights
big
between
dialectic
them.
now, isn't it?
Oh, yes, big now.
Yeah.
My mother and father fought over the issues of, my father were from the Muslim areas, and my mother had been raised on the Jewish plantations. So the two would always struggle with each other.
What are you talking about? Muslim areas and Jewish areas down in Mississippi?
Jackson, Mississippi is Hinds County.
Okay.
It had Iranians, as we would call them today, Persians in the old days.
United Nations down
And
there.
it had, in fact, Iran's brother-in-law lived in Jackson. We had, if you leave Jackson headed towards where I'm born, you'll begin to pick up Palestine Road and Jordan Road.
You say John Road.
It becomes real weird, you know. You were like, wait a minute, Palestine. That didn't say Philistine Road. Because generally you associate with the Bible when you say Jordan Road.
Yeah, but you were down there with
a lot of Arabs.
You were there all the time. You're getting up, but you get to see you're getting into your college. You're going to college, you're doing that, and you're involved in the civil rights, and you're involved.
Yeah, after 55, I'm heavily involved in civil rights.
After 55,
55 is my beginning year.
You're 15. You're 15
I'm 15 years old and 55. Yes, I began to be involved in getting in the NAACP.
Right.
Began to set up a Black History Club, trying to get young people involved in learning about ourselves. With no books, we didn't have a library.
All favor, your family was giving you all the support they could in order to go take that course.
I'm not going to go there now.
No, you don't want to go there. No, what did the family think about it?
They wanted me to get a college degree and get me a job and find a husband.
Yeah, right. That's not the first family that's felt that way about a daughter, I think.
No. They were not excited to have us in the
They weren't excited to have you were out there working against the grain.
Not a girl.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting.
Now, remember, even though I'm raised in a family where my father felt that boys and girls both should do equal work that we were capable of doing.
Yeah.
So I didn't grow up like my neighbors, ironing my brother's stuff and all that, unless they paid me. I didn't grow up with female work and male work.
You didn't?
Oh, no. I elected to cook for the family when I was 10. That was my elected to do it because I like to eat, and it was a way of being to myself. I was always a child who liked to be to herself. I would be doing my little poetry and writing and
God bless the child that got their own.
Amen.
Yeah.
And so my thing was washing clothes, ironing clothes, and cooking.
But you're getting interested in things social and political and everything like that.
That's right. That's after
And there's
55.
a lot of people who say, don't go out and mess with that. That's too dangerous. Or you don't push that. Look out for your, there's an element of look out for yourself, your own thing, practical.
That's right.
Stay away from the controversy. Stay away from pushing the idea. That's, that kind of thing.
My mother was very radical.
What about your
she
brothers?
didn't mind pushing the idea.
She was radical.
She didn't mind the boys going out.
What about your daddy? Was he radical?
My daddy was a working man.
Okay.
That was always, he said, somebody has to take care of the family.
Yeah, that's a responsible thing.
And so he had 2 kids in desegregated schools.
Right.
He had one child who was beaten half to death as he pulled off the most powerful of all the boycotts in Jackson. In the South, Jackson, Mississippi, Louis Liddell.
Yeah.
Louis Liddell was my junior brother.
Really? Okay.
When I founded NAACP's North Jackson chapter and left, after I left Medgar.
Medgar Evers.
Medgar Evers, yes.
Yeah.
Louis, my 5th brother, replaced me as president of that chapter.
So you're involved, and your brothers are involved in that?
Oh, yes, my younger brothers and my older brothers are involved when they can.
I was trying to get the feel of what the family was.
Yeah, my older brothers, my daddy is obviously a laborer, a common laborer. My older brothers started out, the oldest one, working with my uncle. We did a lot of contracting work, laying the main hole system, that's a sewage system, for a place like Shreveport, Greenwood, Mississippi, all over the place, making good money because they were into get these subcontracts. Certainly nowhere near what they should have been making, but doing all right. My second brother was brilliant. He went over and found a man who was a veterinarian, and he studied under him. And he convinced him through his wife that he should, give him an internship, and then he got it. And he set up a poodle shop, cutting dog's hair, called John's Poodle Shop. Yeah. Also won Mississippi's first major chess champion. My daddy was a great checker player, so all the boys played checkers. My 7th brother was America's national champion for about 2 or 3 years.
No kidding. Yeah,
oh yeah,
that's
so
great.
there's weird things that we do on the
Yeah,
side. These
yeah,
are sideline things.
right. On the Cracker Barrel. You know,
you were always doing work in the family.
Yeah.
There was never you're always doing some kind of work.
Yeah.
My third brother became a professional soldier. He was 15 and decided he'd get in the Army at 15. And rather than pull him out and have him go to spend, they told him that he would have to spend 2 years in jail. They left him in. My fourth brother, like my second brother, was also a genius. He got involved as working as a janitor for an engineering firm.
Yeah.
And after a couple of years, he was at field operations and purchasing agent.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh, yes, and remained there in the field operations.
Those are people working out their own individual thing and everything like that. But what about the movement?
These were the older brothers.
Yeah.
And they also doing movement work, what I call nighttime movement work. They were the guerrillas. That's what be my fifth brother. They were guerrillas.
Guerrilla.
They believed about guerrilla activity, meaning that they were the ones who did not believe in nonviolence. They believed in other ways of taking care of what they call simple business.
Right. All right. Yeah.
All right.
Simple business.
Simple business.
Yeah, I like the way you say that.
Nonviolence.
I like the way you say
nonviolent movements don't work unless you're surrounded by other forms of violence. As they saw
I'm afraid
I'm not
I
offering it as.
I understand exactly what you're saying.
But the Jackson boycott today, Jackson, Mississippi is just recovering from its boycott.
Really?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So now there is a downtown Jackson. I understand there are some closed stores down there where you can try on store, but the movie was so successful that it brought it to a halt. It ended it. A very successful movement where black people brought their food and other things in from Memphis, New Orleans, Mobile, rather than buying Jackson.
But you got involved.
I got involved in the movement seriously when I went to college.
Okay. You went to college. What college? Where?
Tougaloo Southern Christian College.
You're 19 now. You're 19 now.
Right. That's the year that I turned 19.
And you went to college, and then you got involved in politics and double NCP.
More involved with NAACP. More involved in politics because I'm always just doing little things as young girl things.
Yeah. Right.
But I was a good student and enjoyed high school. And if you go to the high school, my name's on the wall along with Richard Wright and Lerone Bennett and whoever.
Richard Wright out of Chicago, the one that we.
Yeah,
Richard Wright the right.
He's a Mississippian. When you meet Chicago,
Richard Wright. It's 108th. It's 100th anniversary.
I am the national coordinator for the Richard Wright Centennial. Yes, I am.
And you're on the same plaque with him, or in the same school?
The same wall with him. He was
there.
He was there for a few days. I was there for 2 years.
Yeah.
No, he went to high school.
But this is the 208 is the anniversary.
September
100th anniversary of his birth.
September 4th, 1908 is his birth.
That's just about 100 years ago.
It is 100 years ago.
God bless him. He's a great writer. Yeah.
Oh, powerful writer. Powerful activist.
Activist as well. I didn't realize.
Pan-Africanist. And he was at the Bandung Conference. That's Richard Wright. I mean,
right.
Getting in trouble.
I got it mixed up for my mind with Reverend Wright up in Chicago, which gave Obama
actually, Reverend Wright, I asked because I was...
Any relating?
Since the Wright family also moved to Chicago, I was very curious, but actually Reverend Wright comes off the Virginia side. Remember, we have all these white slave masters' names. The slave names have remained with us. We have we were not as fortunate as Cassius Clay to take the bold and aggressive move to change them.
Wouldn't he something else?
I love it with a passion.
Something else he's in?
I love it with a passion. Oh, he stings like a bee. He's
right.
Very fine.
Floats like a butterfly.
Oh, yeah.
But you got really involved heavy when you got to college?
Yeah, I got to college. I got involved.
We're up to
college,
59,
by 59.
And things were just hotting up there. That's about the time Lucy was about to come down, Commissar, and a lot of other folks
coming out. But in
north.
659, Tougaloo was founded in Mississippi, the first college chapter of NAACP.
Good for you.
It will be followed by a college chapter at Campbell College, which will be destroyed. Then we begun that same year to talk about some kind of a test case. Remember, NAACP believed in test cases.
Right. Yeah.
Not in civil disobedience, which was always a theme that we dealt with and would lead to my leaving Medgar later on.
When did you? Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So Medgar's been hanging out, and so this is when I really get to know him really well.
When did you first hear the name Martin King?
55.
55.
He was a preacher down in Montgomery. But I don't want to give the impression that he was a great inspirer of the 60s struggle, because that's actually a youth movement. And it has been a whole movement in this country to deny youth access to their history, to the accolades. There are 4 young men that sit down at a lunch counter. They have a statue down there where they sit down at Greensboro. But they need a national monument in Washington, D.C., because it was those 4 young men who followed in the footsteps of Claudette Colvin, the 15-year-old girl, and the second 18-year-old girl, no, 17, Louise Smith at Montgomery, who in October before Rosa Parks sat on the bus. Not to take anything away from Rosa Parks.
Yeah, I understand what
but
you're saying.
that was a
Get
boycott.
to the real roots of what,
right,
yeah, this
right.
tree's got many roots.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So these young people who would be the foundation of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
I associate that with Stokely Carmichael.
That would be, Carmichael would be the second. But there's a string of people that precede him.
That preceded him.
There's Diane Nash, who was known often as the mother of the sit-in movement.
Okay.
There's Marion Barry, who would become mayor of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
There's John Lewis.
John Lewis, yeah, right.
Who would be, before John Lewis, there's Chuck McDew, the youngest of the chairs of the Student Nonviolent
Some of those
Coordinating
people
Committee.
are unknown to the general public, but they should be known.
But they should
and
be
the
known.
history should be written and sung.
That's right. It should be rewritten in a way in which to capture youth. America has a habit of knocking youth in the head.
Youth usually has some pretty good ideas. They sometimes want to get knocked down by the old folks who think they ought to be practical and cave in and everything. With youth, we'd be pretty bad off if it wasn't for that youthful exuberance.
Yeah, that youthful exuberance, that newness.
Yeah.
SNCC has 3 great slogans. The first one comes 3 great slogans.
Yeah, who has?
Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, called SNCC.
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't
the acronym is SNCC.
Yeah.
Has 3 great slogans. The first one comes from Chuck McDew, who said we had to make America safe for democracy.
Yes.
Make the world safe for American democracy.
Yeah.
Chuck McDew is out of Ohio. The second one would come from Julian Bond, who would be state senator and then congressman, and now heads up the NAACP. Julian would say that anything over 30 is dangerous. And then there's Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, who would say Black Power.
Yeah.
Of course, that grew out of Willie Ricks and some others, and certainly was Richard Wright's stuff.
Yeah.
He has that piece, Black Power.
Yeah, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, took the name of, he was really wonderful. And he was really funny. He was funny. I really loved him. He was really good. We roomed together in Libya. He was he's a wonderful guy. I just think he's wonderful, great. He's really
He was young, filled with fire.
Well, I didn't know him. I didn't know him then because I was, but I knew him in the more later years.
I met him in '61
We both admire
in Mississippi,
Muammar Gaddafi.
Yes.
And I think Muammar Gaddafi is an important figure on the world scale.
Oh, I don't doubt it, but all those African presidents that were really standing out, even Idi Amin, but
him I don't know much about, but I knew I liked Muammar Gaddafi.
My mother always said that he was the last black man on earth.
She said
and that was because he was willing to say that I have a right to make mistakes too.
Yeah.
Everybody, Africans don't have a right to make mistakes.
Yeah, right. Thank you. That's good. Yeah.
She liked Gaddafi as well because he looked like my brother John.
Well, I like him because of his ideas. I think he's ahead of the curve.
He's a fantastic.
I think he's ahead of the curve in terms of the changes we haven't even thought about in this country yet.
Yes.
They've already initiated at an ideological level over there in Libya, I think.
Yeah, the only thing that bothers me about him is that I'm not looking forward to a Muslim state, but beyond that, I don't want Africa to become a Muslim state.
Well, no, it's Muslim. They're Muslims coming out of that, but I mean, he is to the modern world the way the United States and the Enlightenment or whatever it is had a lot of changes to do was to the feudal state of Europe for 1,000 years under the Ancien regime. I think we have an Ancien regime running the world, and there's got to be a transformation fundamental as...
there will be a transformation.
I still think it's ahead of us.
I'm working with this Sister Cynthia McKinney.
Yeah.
But
Sister
we're working
McKinney, we got to get to her.
Yeah, she's going to be over here on Friday night. She's going to be right here on Friday night.
Wonderful. That's wonderful, yeah.
She's coming here to do a Black Women in Politics conference with WBAI, so I'm really pleased about that. But we're talking about a Reconstruction movement. We have got to talk about real issues in this country.
Thank you.
All of these candidates, except I can't talk about the candidate, but people are subverting the issues rather than dealing with real issues. And we can't just say economics. It's not
economics
enough.
is important.
We can't just say it. Of course, it's critical.
Yeah, I wish we had an economic theory that really. The progressives need an economic theory that's
hey, you heard what I said, didn't you? We need to go back to Dr. King.
I didn't hear good enough.
I'm saying, listen to me. I want you to hear.
We're
on the same page here.
Yeah. You say so much. That's the trouble.
Yeah, I'm sorry I had to say it so fast.
Yeah,
but that fifth region.
You got so much to get out. You got to get it out there.
You got to have those 2 or 3 more shows. But Dr. King said in the 60s, he was talking about America redefining her values, which the Republican wing and the right-wing religious groups would misunderstand. Among the values that we have to redefine is the value for work. Because we have entered a cybernetic age.
We do indeed.
And we're the second semester of that cybernetic age. We're in the second generation here. We're 2 decades in.
Yeah, we start measuring right.
If we see industries dying in 1990, then we have to understand we are facing now the second decade. And the honest truth is that if you're in a cybernetic nation, as well developed as this, we don't need more than 1/3 of the present workforce. And that's a part of the problem that's happening.
Lord Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, the great economist, said that he wrote a letter to his grandchildren, and he wrote it in 1930. And he said, you're going to be confronted with something that it is very hard for you to fathom as being possible, but the grandchildren, that would be about now, he said, you're going to be confronted with technologically induced unemployment.
Amen.
And here you got all the income being distributed through labor, and the assets are all owned by a tiny plutocratic class.
Correct.
They're like serfs on a feudal estate, and they seem to accept the system in place, and they don't talk about some sort of way of getting income to people other than through their labor.
That's correct.
That's a real big...
I'll redefine labor.
All right, maybe. Okay, do that.
Because you can redefine labor.
Yeah,
one way,
you.
so that the grandmother who is doing what I'm doing here with you.
Yeah.
And I have 14 grandchildren.
Lucky you.
Oh,
I've only got 4. I've only got 4.
I have
14.
I have 4 children.
Yeah.
And mine range from newborn in March to well, no, that's March, February. That baby will be upset with me. That's February 27th to a child who will be 22 this year.
Okay, right.
That's my biological grandchildren.
Yeah.
But my sons married women who also had children, a couple of my sons.
Yeah.
So actually, my first grandchildren, through marriage, my second marriage, and through my son's, my second son's wife, who also had a child.
My daughter and her husband.
That child is 25 this year.
Oh, my daughter and her husband gave me 2 grandsons, and my son and his wife gave me 2 granddaughters. They're about 5 and 7 years old, and they're just really something else, man.
Oh, they're remarkable.
I think my favorite human beings are their 5-year-olds. I think,
I got a 6-year-old to turn your head.
They are just. They have they're so honest. Do you know what I mean?
They start around 3.
And they got no artifice. They're just gorgeous. I think somewhere the good book said the children will lead us. I think we could do well to be led by the conscience of our 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds.
Yeah, because they're still developing language, and they're developing languages of their own, and they have the knowledge that we have plus.
And they're creative.
Yeah, because they always they have nothing else to do but study. I mean, 12 years of not doing anything but study, just think about it.
We should keep that consciousness as adults.
Yes.
It gets beat out. We end up like us, I mean, they're much better than we are in terms of being creative. They're really the most creative age. I mean,
lovely.
And we got off on a subject, grandchildren.
Yeah, well, grandchildren are always there, but grandchildren can't take us away from. That's because we're talking about values.
Yeah.
But the civil rights movement was laying a base for the revolution that we have to go into.
Yeah.
And that is a revolution in values in every area of this country.
That revolution is still ahead of us.
That's
the culmination that's still ahead of us.
It's got to come.
We can't look back.
But the economic piece is always the guiding piece, because obviously economics is the force that moves us in the world.
Yeah, and the people who are calling themselves the world leaders do not have a vision that the future requires.
That's right.
You understand what I just said?
That's right.
They don't have a vision. They're linked into old, outdated institutions, assumptions, even notions of human nature that are outdated by what the future requires if we're going to survive and prosper, rather than perhaps eliminate our whole species, which our weapons will allow us to do now. It's an existentially challenging moment, and they don't have the vision required in order to liberate. We'd better liberate rather than annihilate the planet.
That's right. And there are those who
you hear what I said?
I heard
liberate rather than annihilate. Those are the choices.
But 2 choices.
Those are 2 choices, and we don't have vision to the liberation.
That's right. So
okay,
the
we're
nation
still
state,
in segregation.
we need to sit down. We are.
Yeah.
a culture of captivity.
That's right.
Unless you're one of those corporate tops, we are in the culture of captivity.
Well, it's a few little at the top.
That's right.
A few little at the top.
The rest of us in the culture of captivity.
Yeah, and we just we don't have an
There's a maze of
So we got a big challenge ahead of us yet. There's been a lot of work done, but we still got a big challenge ahead of us. Still, okay, that's the point we're making. And so I'm glad Cynthia's going to be coming to New York. Cynthia McKinney's great. She's really good. She's really saying the truth. Beautiful. She's saying a lot of truth to power, isn't she?
Yeah, she's talking about those economic issues. She's looking at NAFTA and CAFTA, and she's looking at the issue of immigration in a way that it needs to be looked at. We can't continue to beat people in the head who used to live in the country. That the place that they lived here before we named it something different. But she's also looking at the war at home in other ways too. We're talking about what's happened with this mass unemployment that we can't define because we won't tell the truth about why it's happening. So she's looking at that issue as well.
Well, we got to have a different way of distributing income, don't we, than the way we traditionally have. We're what Marxists, I'm not a Marxist, but you call wage slaves.
Whatever.
All the institutions are set up by the templates are set up by the few who own all the assets. They set up all the things, and you don't do what is going to fit there, you're going to lose your grant. You're going to lose your salary. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose it. It's still intimidation and everything like that. And there's nothing like liberation blowing in the wind.
That's right.
I mean, the division is economics. They need an economics.
There's no question about it. And I think that the masses of us had better understand that the one way to go, we could become soap.
All for soil and green become food. I'd rather not, thank you. I'd rather not.
So we better wake ourselves up. We got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But we need unemployed workers' unions. We need to unionize. This is Dr. King when he tried to go to Chicago in '65, and I was there with him as well.
He was with the garbage workers, wasn't he?
Yeah, garbage workers in Memphis. But prior to the garbage workers, he was in Chicago organizing Union to End Slums movement that we were forced into an open housing bill around. But we need to revisit that thinking. And it's not just King, because we always had a string of people from Poland, people from London, people from all over the world that were involved in helping to build the local movements here because we understood that we were connected to the world. That these boundaries called national states keep us from being human beings. And now we got the crisis coming in Europe because as Europe takes on the euro and the EU.
Yeah, they're coming over and buying all our real estate.
That's right, but they have to take their now they're struggling around those old national boundaries that was artificially set up, with the Germans being the last of them, dissolving the Habsburg Empire during the 1870s. Because those boundaries have created cultural traditions that are now maddening. Africa and Gaddafi, and he's not the only one, but certainly he's been a primary, talking about Africa becoming one state.
Yeah, African Union, the African Union. That he's doing a lot down in Africa. They're trying to do, but he's got a level over there. You can start they had a lot of money, so they spread it around. Everybody owns their own home and everything, and you can start a business over there. And they got to do things socially, health and everything. All that's avoided because they had a lot of money. They only got 4 million people. But if you start a business over there, they got a thing they try to follow, and they say you start a business, entrepreneur. Some guys started a pasta factory. They help you over the starting cost of entrepreneur living, and the one thing they try to maintain is you can't hire anybody.
What?
You understand? You can't hire anybody.
Okay.
So everybody has to be an owner of the business and have a ownership stake in the business. And I think that's a very progressive idea.
So it's a form of cooperative.
It's a cooperative thing, but it does not do away with the institution of private property in some socialized way. But instead of the assets all being held by a few, it can be democratized to everybody as a way of distributing income. That's an idea.
Well, that was my idea of a concept of